I appreciate it. I'm going to ask Greg and Steve, why don't we come on up? So thank you to the members for allowing us to speak today, and thank you to Amara and the team at EisnerAmper for actually helping to set this up. And welcome to our offices. This is an amazing space. We have this is one of the newer offices, actually, interestingly enough, and a lot of the other offices that we're renovating are going to be a lot like this, which is amazing. It's just great to even have the technology here. So, little background on me. So I've been at the firm 15 years. I've been doing this well over 20. And although we're all born out of the accounting cloth, we're really more process-oriented and technology practitioners. We know a lot about process and controls, and technology is everything, right? It's how you're transacting, it's how you're looking at reports, it's how you're actually going out to the outside. We have a lot of SEC clients that do SEC reporting. We also work with startups. So we see everything from start to finish. And what allows us to really help our clients is end to end. We can actually see where digital transformation is going to come in. And that's what today's topic is all about. So Greg and Steve both came from a robotics process automation firm called Redwood Software, or Redwood Robotics. And Greg's been with us since January of 2018, and Steve recently last year. So you're going to hear us talk a little bit about some stories of what we're seeing, why this is so prevalent when digital transformation is discussed in groups, whether it be CEOs, founders, private equity firms. Why are they so engaged to want to know more about this? And especially here, obviously with this group, I know you're probably seeing a lot of it. So we're looking for some questions from you as well to hear your thoughts, see if this resonates. So I want to allow Greg and Steve to actually introduce themselves as well. So go right ahead.
Go ahead, Steve.
Hello, everyone. Steve Palomino. I'm an accountant, as they said by trade, but have just picked up technology early on in my career. I think it's really differentiated me from the pack, without a doubt. I have about 20 years of experience in applications, migrations, and transformation. And in the last 3 years, really worked in the RPA space, looking at what's going on with automation, and it's pretty amazing. We're also seeing in the ERP environment the applications themselves becoming smarter and smarter. So it's not just these bolt-ons or surrounding applications, but now we're seeing it actually flow through theirs, and so it's pretty exciting times, actually, very exciting times for an accountant.
And again, I'm Greg Fritzke. I am a director. I'm based in New Jersey. I often joke that I'm the original robot, because when I started working, I think my first responsibilities when I was in Merrill Lynch's accounting department was about 95% process oriented. Spent the rest of my career trying to figure out how to automate everything, right? So really spent a lot of time in accounting, auditing. I was with Deloitte for a number of years, and then I got more into IT, software, consulting. Really, people ask me, what do you do? I like to solve problems. I like to work with clients. I like to try to figure out how to use technology or have them leverage technology to their advantage. It's an exciting time. You guys are in a great space. I always say to Jerry, I love the vibe that I get when I come out to the Valley. It's, that sense of, out east, it's there. It's just here, you just feel it's every part of every conversation, discussion. It's very collaborative. It's very exciting times, and this is something we're very passionate about. So being among peers and kindred spirits, that's something we really enjoy. So thanks for having us today.
Yeah, great. So I know we're going to have a little bit of a presentation. Greg, I'm going to ask you to actually slide over so you guys can see the screen, and then we'll just have a seat. Feel free to ask questions along the way. So I'm going to take you through a little bit of the journey of,
Get out of the way.
Did I get out of your way?
You're not that transparent.
I'm not? Am I out of the way yet? Let me move over a little bit more. How about that? I think you'll just have to look at the other screen. So, in essence, I want to take you through what we're seeing, right? So when it comes to technology, this is what we're seeing across the board. We've used this slide probably for the last 2.5 years. We rebranded the group Process Risk and Technology Solutions as a firm a little less than 2 years ago. And the reason why we did that is because that's exactly what we do as consultants for the firm. It's one of the fastest growing areas within the firm. And it's across all industries. And really, the focus areas for us are sitting in the robotics, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, and then also blockchain. And there's a lot of data that's going around all these different elements. But we focus on what you see to my left. We're trying to figure out how it impacts the company, right? Your company. And we also even help out our firm looking at what is the impact? How are our clients, how do we use robotics? We talked about that earlier today in a session here in a lunch and learn. So we're constantly doing that and talking about the impact. We have to have a point of view. Is it a return on investment? What are we really doing this for? And also, again, process risk technology, we have to talk about the risks. So how do you govern this? There's an element of governance in everything, right? So my career has been in governance, risk, and compliance the entire 22 years. And I will tell you that no board member is going to tell you, or no investor is going to tell you that they don't care about governance. They really do. They want transparency. And all this technology is going to help build stronger controls as well, and we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll give you some anecdotes. So in essence, data is the most important, right? And it's not new to you guys in this room. I think you know that data is important. It's the element that drives everything, right? Data is the new currency. It has been the currency for quite a while. So this is the adoption rate. When we talk about collaboration and tools, that's the time to adopt is very easy. We think everybody is there at this point. But how do we get down this trough of data, tools, analytics, automation, predictive? That's where we're heading. And that's where I see the investors going. They want to see that embedded in the business. Most companies that are embedding this in their business can actually see their multiples in terms of evaluation actually increase by 3 to 5x if they're doing this within their business. If you could show the value of it. That's just internally. We're actually trying to do that even within our firm. Not more for the valuation of the multiple, but just because it's so valuable to us and to our clients. If we could actually get benchmarking out of analytics, give it to you as a client when you just sign up even to do an audit. So it's really important to us to manage data well. So I know there's a lot here, and I probably need to slide over. So this, I think, tells a lot, but the most important is the CEO of any organization, the founder, needs to drive digital transformation. It's not going to work if you don't, right? We go into many organizations, and it's driven by IT and technology departments, and usually it fails. We see that the CEO and the founders, even other senior management members, may have a tie into it. They see the value, but they're just not entrenched in the process, and they need to be. So it starts at leadership, but you can see there's an element of what the CEO needs to do to set the stage, improving leadership, looking at regulation, and then below this line, you have all these trends. Data foundation. I mean, Steve probably spends most of his time in the data world when he's doing a robotics process automation job. Anytime he's implementing it, he starts with the data, and certainly the process even before that. So this is where the foundation is down below. And that's what we need to figure out. You need to build an ecosystem. And it's certainly a journey when we see it. So that's important. And this, I'm going to pass it to Greg in just a moment. We like to tell this story quite a bit. This is what's happening now and has been happening. So most of the people that you see within organizations, especially in accounting and finance, are to the left. They're spending all of their time on production and some time in controls. Again, governance is important. Very little time in the analytical world. Very little time on analysis. We're flipping it. We're now in this world. This is where the value is. If you could turn that around internally, that's how you actually change what's going on within your four walls, and certainly if you have clients, how they view you, your investors, everyone will see you differently.
And if you think about it, with all the ERP applications and all the technology, how long it's taken us to move just a little bit to the right side of the screen.
There you go. Sure.
Sorry. To move to the right side of the screen. And with RPA and analytics, and I always say data is not important, information is important. And that's been the challenge for years, is the amount of effort it takes to produce and get data, and you have very little time to turn it into information. And that's what we're seeing now with these new technologies. And that's what excites me, is being able to push this now efficiently and not have to doesn't cost you a fortune. And we're seeing these technologies drop, into the mid-market. So it used to be you had to be a very, very wealthy firm, or you had to have a lot of infrastructure to move, but now we're seeing the costs have dropped significantly. So it's actually hitting the lower mid-market.
Jerry, on the previous slide, you had this thing called technical debt.
Technical debt, yeah.
What did you mean by that?
So the technical debt is, in essence, not even the return. It's how much are you actually going to spend on it? Do you even have that as part of your strategy and business plan and budget? So what are you actually going to invest in it, and where is that capital coming from? And are you going to get the return? So we see a lot of companies, for instance, we spent a lot of time with IBM Watson, and we're actually implementing. We'll go through that in a minute and what we're doing with it. But it's a matter of knowing where the goal is, and do we know we're going to spend $1 million or $5 million? And is that capital coming from, we're a partnership, so is it coming from the partners? Where is that coming from? And is it sitting on, are you actually getting the asset, or are you just creating a liability? So that's what we mean there. The asset should be there, and I'm not saying that's even more than 5x. Then you should get at least 10x or more on your investment.
To Steve's point, the information really comes from the data.
Yes.
The more data you have, and data is today sitting in all kinds of silos, and how
That's
you
right.
connect it and how you extract the information, and that's all with the right type of AI and machine learning tools.
Correct. AI, machine learning. You really have to, if you don't have the right data foundation, you're probably not going to get as much value.
And it
It's a
could
big
be, too,
deal.
just processes, right? And that's when I start with organizations, I often look at the current state. What are you guys doing right now? It's all people, process, and technology. It could be you have a great system, but your processes are inefficient, and therefore you're not able to get to that data quickly. It could be that your technology is antiquated and your point of sale systems are great, but feeding into your GL is not, and so you're not able to get that information. So that's what we start to look at, and then after we understand that, then we go into AI and our RPA first, and then AI, which is what I'm seeing mostly is just algorithmic analytics. As far as the computer looking at different trends in your information and picking that out, and pushing it to someone to look at.
The hardest part, by the way, of this entire slide is creating digital change agents within your organizations. That's the hardest part. CEO can definitely be there, leadership could be there, but ultimately it has to be pushed down somehow, even if you're a small organization. So,
CTO, the traditional sense of Chief Technical Officer, no longer is a CTO, it's a Chief Transformation Officer.
that's right.
Yeah.
He changes the mindset.
CTOs are turning into Chief Transformation Officers, Chief Innovation Officers. It's tied into Chief Growth Officer. It's all together. That's exactly right. They're more business savvy as well. So,
I would just say this is where Greg used to sit when I was the original robot. So, I spent like I said, this is really where we're trying to get to, and with the technologies of today, the convergence of these technologies, the fact that there's a lot of emphasis on it, a lot of the price points have come down. You're starting to see, to Steve's point, the implementation of these technologies, and we're starting to see the paradigm shift, right? So there's more of a focus on how do we reduce the amount of process activities, manual activities, repetitive tasks, and then how do we start to harvest and manage data? And that's really kind of where we kind of sit, and that's where we've been playing a big role in that. I would say one of the biggest changes I've seen is the shift from it being an IT-driven program to a business-driven program. So you're seeing more and more CFOs, right, COOs getting involved, CEOs. To Jerry's point, without that kind of support, these initiatives, they have a difficult time, transforming the whole organization. Maybe they sit in a silo, but this is really a holistic change. Something transformative like this doesn't just sit in one business line. So talked a lot about this new digital office, and people, they envision that, oh boy, our jobs are going to be replaced. There's a lot of concern about, the workforce of the future. Is it going to involve me? And, repurposing, getting jobs of more value. What's going to happen to the process level jobs, right? every industry goes through this change, and this is, nothing new. It's just now a lot of this is happening in the actual offices. And so, what we're seeing with things like process automation and AI, is this going to be what we see? What I would say is that this individual will continue to have that role, just with less process activities, will spend more time harvesting and trying to figure out what the data tells them. Probably spending more time with their customers, right? More touch points, more human interaction, which most of the time we're so down in the day-to-day, we can't do those things today, and we want to do those things, bring more value to our clients and our customers. So, the future, you can see there's, the do now folks, dynamics, the actives, beginners, you see the change. You see that it's actively changing right now. More and more people are embracing this, and those that are doing it, they're seeing more transformation. They're seeing more capabilities that they're getting out of data and retrieving, and we've seen it in the audit space right now. We're seeing a lot of change. So, we're trying to stay ahead of the curve also. This is not something that's unique to any industry or any specific profession. This is across the board. It really boils down to a mindset.
Well, earlier today we had a lunch and learn. Earlier today we had a question about, in our lunch and learn internally, about industry. And years ago when I worked in industry and then went into consulting, we used to get the question, have you worked in oil and gas? Have you worked in, telecom, whatever, right? There was always sort of that leading question, and yes or no was the answer. What we're seeing now is more around technologies. Do you understand our ERPs? Have you ever worked with large data? It's really not as much industry driven these days as it really is a transformation of that data, transformation of that whole digital space. It's pretty fascinating, and it's really only changed probably in the last 3 or 4 years. So it's happened quite rapidly.
Yeah.
So are you able to integrate all of this with the reporting of the government that is actually? Are you able to integrate this thing, with this technology with the reporting governance that Sarvin's actually?
Yes.
That's music to our ears. That's our bread and butter, by the way. That's what we're doing.
There's some really cool stuff we're doing. For instance, I don't know if you've ever heard of Blackline, right? Blackline it's a matching and control software. It's been around a long time, probably 15 years. It probably has 50% of the market share in your upper mid-market and public companies. And what we're doing is we're chaining this all together now. So we have your GL pushes data into Blackline, right? And it could be any GL, it could be whatever, Dynamics, pushing data into Blackline, and then from there we're actually pushing the reconciliation and matching type information into Workiva, into our work papers. So we're actually pushing this across our platforms, and you're seeing this information. So when it comes to Sarbanes and controls and the RCMs, now we can actually push this data in, quarterly, daily, weekly, whatever we want. We don't have to wait when it comes to testing. So it reduces our costs now, and our less costs we have, less costs you have. The cool part is now the data and the information is being pushed and stored.
So are these your own solutions or third-party solutions which you have integrated into your system?
Both. So
It's both,
both.
yeah.
So we actually built our own solutions in-house, but we're not a software company. There are a number of software companies that we are partnering with. Workiva is one of them. Blackline's one of them. We're also working with Adaptive, which is an analytics tool, which I really like. It's a very inexpensive one compared to Hyperion Planning. And so now we're able to take the analytics and pull this flat data out and then start running, traps on that data year over year, quarter over quarter, month over month. For instance, to look at journal entries, right, or top sides or control weaknesses can be identified in the data fairly quickly.
When I read about AI and in the light of digital transformation, certain jobs are threatened. And the first job that is really threatened is the bookkeeper. The next one is accountant. And the third is the investment advisor. What is your feedback on that?
That's what we migrated from accounting.
That's right. That's right. We migrated as accountants 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So,
I
well,
would say it's like anything. If you don't want to move from Excel, if you want to stay in Excel and don't want to leave it, and don't want to learn new technologies, if you don't want to leave Excel and you don't want to learn new technologies, and you don't want to use cloud-based or ShareFile or SharePoint, you're probably going to get left behind. I think that's just a reality. And
yeah.
Just to add to that, what I see is going to be an expansion of roles. So to your point, what you said is very functional. Those were functional roles that people perform. So I tell my teams and my staff that right now they're learning new technologies. They're broadening their experience. So they're not just going to be doing audit testing. They're going to also be a business analyst. They're going to be spending more time defining requirements and looking at ways to build solutions. It's going to be a different mindset, and they're going to require different skills, but they're actually building on the skills they already have, because in order to understand the requirements, they have to have done it before. So we're finding, we took one individual from our testing team and had him download some software from UiPath, actually started building some bots. Next thing we know, now he's playing more of a solutions role. So his role has completely changed, and actually he's much happier. It was something he was sort of more passionate about. You sort of identify those individuals. Now, is everyone going to be able to do those things? No. Different personalities, different passions, but expanding those roles and having people do more different activities is really what the future is going to hold, and they should be able to do more.
Well, I think it's also value driven, right? So what's the value of the bookkeeper? What's the value of the accountant? What's the value of the investment advisor? Is it really the number crunching, or is it the conclusions and judgments that they're reaching? That's what we have to figure out, because if it's the number crunching, that we know we can do a better job at. And in their roles, to that point, they need to come up, and we need to encourage them. That's the changing mindset. So the digital mindset and the digital IQ needs to be in everybody's DNA going forward. So if they're doing something that they see as manually focused and routine, then we need to talk about how we can do that better. Get it off your plate so you can be focused on other things. Be more analytical. Again, that pyramid, flipping the other way. So that's the key. Is it going to happen? Sure. But each individual, however they're driven, that's going to be the determination of where they land ultimately.
That's right.
So, I mean, unfortunately, we can't control that. It's one of the reasons why they're talking about taxing bots, right? Mm-hmm. And you guys are hearing about that as well, because bots may take certain jobs. So they're talking about, is it the same as a payroll tax? Is it a digital worker or not? So.
The biggest challenge is going to be, you can analyze the data.
Yeah.
And come up with the answer. The biggest challenge is predictive analytics.
Yeah.
That requires a real genius to
That's right.
predict how the future will look.
I don't think that's going to go away. The predictive and judgment part of it, that's not going to go away. And you'll hear in a little bit. I mean, we use as a firm IBM Watson and AI for contract reviews, for revenue recognition with the new accounting standards. So why would we hire high salaried people to look through contracts to figure out where they need to focus? Instead, we allow the technology to do the work. Now, it took us well over a year to teach the machine to do it, what we wanted to, with different requirements. But now the individuals are looking at and spending, let's call it 95% of their time on analysis on what that needs to be, what the judgment is. That's what we want. But it took us well over a year to do that. So it is a journey.
So RPA, I'm sure you've heard of it, being in the space that you're in, but we're seeing an uptick in the number of people that want to get involved, or at least start some sort of proof of concept, or they're moving forward a full project and identifying, use cases, their own use cases for deploying bots. And we oftentimes get the question is, how far, how much, what's a good use case? What's the business case for it? Everyone's trying to put together a program. Steve and I worked for a number of years at Redwood Software, and he flew around the West. I was in the East. Spent a lot of times with CFOs and controllers having this conversation about the value. They get it now. When we first started, it was a little bit more like an education. Now it's, how fast can I move? How do I get good governance around it? How do I put a program together? But the reality is, as much as everyone wants to talk about AI and analytics, it all starts with the data again, and to have everything in order, your processes. You want to evaluate your processes, your data inputs, and robotics is a great way to manage data and moving things around from disparate systems. So we've seen a lot of really good use cases where clients have many different systems. We were at the conference a couple days ago where a client talked about 53 different instances of SAP, all different entities, and trying to bring all that data together, and all these other point of sale systems and what have you. So when people are spending a lot of time managing data, it's probably a good place for robotics to help, at least to set the stage in terms of pulling data, validating it, consolidating it. It can run macros, it can do workflow, emails. Capabilities are very strong, and it's not overly difficult to learn. I won't say it's as simple as something that's going to be out of the box and you'll be able to build something, but what we're seeing is this next generation of folks that are getting into the workforce, they're embracing this, they're starting to learn it, and they're actually going to be able to build their own processes, and then they'll be managing the bots. So the clerk, like to your point, the accounting clerk of the past is going to be gone, it's going to be a bot, right? But you'll be managing it and trying to find new ways to improve efficiency. And there's a number of use cases for it. It's really focused on structured data, structured rules-based processes that you can define easily, processes that probably lent themselves before to, outsourcing. It was always, yeah.
Spreadsheet work. Yeah, bookkeeping, spreadsheet work. But what we're seeing now with the RPA, it's moving really fast, is on this interpretation, and you were talking about advanced analytics. I argue most organizations don't really even apply advanced analytics at all. Just taking basic trend analysis, just working with the teams of people who actually understand calculus enough, to snap a line, right? To take that derivative and, differentiate those equations and get down to it. Those are the types of things Watson is really good at doing. And so it's able to start to focus and actually identify trends in your information, so that interpretation's being done there too. So even that 20% is going to shrink. And if you think about true judgment, what we as business people actually make judgments against, how often is it really a true judgment? You know what I'm saying? Normally, it's a very small part of your day making judgments in the workforce. Mostly it's doing, processing, and pushing out and reporting. So.
And then, I was saying before, one of the areas that obviously being part of an accounting firm, we work with a lot of CFOs and controllers, and finance accounting processes are very much, rules-based, very much structured, and probably have been you go into an organization and they probably haven't changed in years. So they're looking for some, help with what's a best practice, what's a way to transform the process, what's a way to automate. This is just a kind of a sample set of number of processes that we've seen evaluated, and folks have moved forward and built bots to accommodate these processes. These are things that you don't want people to have to be worried about. You want them to focus on outcomes. And what we showed before, the 80-20 rule, look for how much of that process can I typically automate, and when all the use cases we've seen, it's usually in the neighborhood of 70, 80, 90%. There's always one part of it, maybe it's exception driven, maybe it's a client touch point, maybe it's something that requires subjective judgment, to Steve's point. But if you can take that process as far end to end, finance is a good place to find use cases, and the dividends are huge. I mean, Steve's put together some models of what some of the ROI is, and it's substantial. It is, 7, 8, 10x
Right.
of the cost of putting something like this in, and we're not talking years. You're talking weeks, sprints, putting in 1, 2 bots, getting a win, and then putting in additional bots, and you can go through this exercise fairly quickly. I've seen clients put up 25, 30 bots in a fairly short order.
And what we're seeing too on this, so every one of these, just so you know, not just at Eisner, but in our travels working with the software company, every one of these I've observed bots being placed on these, on every single one of these tasks. Confirming assets in production, master data management, managing sub-assets, joint ventures is a big one in the oil and gas industry, right? Every single one, because they're very algorithmic, right? It's just information, and it's just data traps. And so I've actually seen in every single one of these bots being built around them by our firm or different firms.
Let me ask you, why don't the ERP firms do that?
That was my question.
That's a big question.
Yeah, that was my question 20 years ago. Why didn't the ERPs do it? They are actually now starting to do more of it. I don't know if it was a selfish thing, like they thought they were going to lose profits. It could be they're big organizations, and any large organization's hard to change. Right? I don't know what the answer is, but I do know, for instance, like Oracle in their cloud platforms are starting to apply advanced analytics. I know SAP is partnered with Blackline, and Blackline purchased Runbook that actually has some pretty significant RPA capabilities, so that they can actually not just run jobs, but prepare the analytics around it. So it's coming, but I think the RPA space is just taken off around it, and maybe they just decided not to do it. Or they'll buy them eventually. Let them bake and then buy.
So we have a number of, we were mentioned before, Blackline, Workiva, Adaptive. What we see is this convergence of bringing these systems together and integrating them to provide some sort of platform. This, to me, is the future. It's building fit-for-purpose type technology that kind of meets a specific need. So leveraging, and what Jerry opened with, it's all about the data. The most important objective here is having integration to the point that I have one source of the truth, regardless of where it resides. And the beauty of these types of systems, like Blackline, which is very transactional, now I can link that into my GRC system, into my audit system. So I can actually do continuous controls. I can do continuous audit. I can do reviews and checks. It's more transparency because everything is going through the transaction engine and everything's being captured and recorded. All the way down to the level where we've seen with using RPA and some of the tools where you can actually capture the audit trail of the activities and the evidence of those activities. So we, on the audit side, have gone in, spent a lot of time working with clients just gathering their requirements. A lot of these things now can be captured and with giving access to us so we can actually not have to be so invasive with the business pulling it together. It's already there. So it's really putting these things, integrating these things, having many different data points and doing it in real time. So what we've seen is, and this is what our clients are also looking to do, is how do you pull these systems together? How do you integrate? And then where do you bring RPA in? And there's intelligent automation is not any one answer. There's a lot of good technology. It's really coming down to what are you trying to accomplish, and what is the process, and what is the problem. So once those are defined, you can really build something for the future. So we talked about continuous audit. At the end of the day, it's about transactions. It's about capturing all the activities. It's about doing it in real time. Again, trying to understand what this. Sorry.
Actually, when we talk about audit, there's a lot of organizations we speak with that aren't public or they're not required to audit. We just think audit in terms of just controlling your business. If someone's not looking at your business, analyzing the information, or looking at the transactions, how do you know you're not leaking money? How do you know someone's not committing fraud? You don't. And so when you think about this whole thought of audit, it's really not just the formal audit, but just understanding what you're doing to control your business environment.
You want to switch mics?
So AI, artificial intelligence. We had a good session a couple weeks ago where we talked to one of our partner firms that we were working with, helped us develop some cognitive capabilities using IBM Watson. One of the things that clients are often saying is, what I want to be able to do is not necessarily get an answer, but help me get to the answer quick. Help me review contracts. We do revenue recognition, we do lease accounting, we do all these things where we have to review numerous unstructured data points and trying to get to the answer. So just trying to be more efficient, right? Trying to get to the answer quicker. AI is helping with that. You see the chat bots, you see the capabilities where people can use mobile devices now to get information that they couldn't get to before. Apps, I would think, any business now that doesn't have an app struggles against its competitors. It's a differentiator. People want to be able to get the information quickly and make decisions quickly. I mean, this morning I made my own decision with the Uber app. It gives you a sense of where you're going to, what's my best way, what's my best way here, what's going to be the most cost effective. I have different scenarios. providing that value to me so I can make that decision.
You don't mention anything about cost. Does the cost go up or cost go down?
So the costs, I think initially may go up from an investment standpoint in year one, but the reality is I think once you put these things in place, it depends how you're also going to structure. You're going to do it as a service. We're starting to see more companies leveraging cloud.
That's true with any CapEx. So if you leave that as a CapEx, it's then separate, the cost of your all these things should go down.
Yeah.
Yes,
And-
absolutely. And the cost should go down. And
You don't mention it.
true, we don't. We do talk about it a lot. I think one of the challenges that I see when I talk with business leaders is they want to see an immediate reduction in cost. So if we talk about RPA, usually I talk in terms of one individual. So if you want to start investing in automation, then look in terms of one of your full FTEs, right? What am I spending on one full FTE accountant, let's say here in San Francisco? And then you kind of have a barometer, a measure of how you want to go at it. And then you can decide how you want to expand. There are a number of different technologies around AI. Most of the AI platforms are like Watson, and it's going to be as a service. You're probably not going to go out and buy your own subscription, although big enough companies do, and then manage it. But absolutely the costs go down. Go ahead, sir.
I disagree with the cost. If you look at AI, and the best definition of AI I have seen is the Ginny Rometty of IBM. According to her, you don't let people confuse what AI is. Don't look at AI as artificial intelligence, look at it augmented intelligence. In addition to your own personal intelligence and ability to analyze, this gives you added intelligence from all your databases. All these things that you just mentioned, higher efficiency, increase, this is all can be summarized by augmented intelligence from all the data that you have collected. And as a result, the employees start to make much better decisions, and they start to look at all the past mistakes and what things have been successful. The cost goes down, it does not go up.
Correct. Yeah, it does go down. But it does go down. The challenge we see is leadership wants to see it happen in 2 months or 3 months, right? What you're describing, learning, right? Learning to work with information takes a while, right? It could take 6 months, it could take a year, and in that year, you're bearing the cost of the implementation and the cost of training. And absolutely, as people get used to the technology, go, oh, I see what it's saying, then it drops off. That's the point. It's not going to happen in 1 day or 1 week. It's going to take a little bit of time.
So we mentioned some of the things that we've actually brought it in-house. We worked with a partner. It's a new space for us. Although we've worked with some different ERPs and we've done some stuff with analytics tools. AI, it's a learning mechanism, and we're learning from the experience as much as we're putting these applications in. We started learning that this isn't something you just buy off the shelf, you put in, and it gives you some sort of outcome. There's a level of learning in terms of how the cognitive capabilities will work, how it recognizes patterns. So what we found is that we had to spend a lot of time initially defining or actually feeding it information like contracts. And we had to put a lot of information. We thought we could put in 2 or 3 contracts. Now it was like 100, right? To really be able to start tagging data, to start recognizing pattern, to start defining rules. Basically learning that at the end of the day, it's similar to, somebody said to me, it's similar to like, a newborn baby that's going to recognize things for the first time and start to make, assumptions based on, it looks at different cause and effect relationships and starts to recognize patterns and starts to make decisions. So initially, I think the process was kind of slow for us. But since, now I got to say that, we had maybe 1 use case, it's morphed into 3, right? So 3 or 4, and we're continuing to roll it out. We're looking at it in terms of helping us with auditing as well, and some of the capabilities around that. So it's a learning process, and it requires having, knowledgeable individuals who can spend time, but also making sure that we're becoming enabled. And we're starting to recognize who or what those new roles are going to be to use this type of technology. So we continue to learn. I think I like your point about the augmented intelligence. I think it really is. I think at the end of the day, it's going to make people's lives better. I think people will always have a role and responsibility, but what I do think it's going to make is more purposeful, more meaningful, value-added type work. But I don't think the people component can be, underestimated. Not at this point, possibly never. Hopefully not in my lifetime, at least until I retire. But I feel that there's always going to be the capability that, or the ability to use a tool like this to just get to a faster outcome and to make more sense of that data. And I think that that's kind of where, these tools, if you go about it in that respects, you're going to learn and you're going to accomplish a lot. But I think some people do get frustrated because they don't see the immediate outcome as they develop these tools. And that's why we often advocate more of a roadmap, start with the rules-based, the process automation, and then start to implement additional technologies as you learn.
What is the output of this process?
So with a number of these different activities, it's essentially identifying for us, applying our rules and identifying where our potential areas of risk are. So we have like risk ratings, risk categories. So for us, it gets to an answer quicker. Doesn't necessarily tell us this is the revenue recognition, this is the provision that we have to calculate, but it gets us to a sense that here's key risk areas that we need to focus on, and it identifies that, and over time it starts to alert us and get better at identifying those capabilities. So that's, for us, that's kind of where we're using
So
it.
basically highlights, if you would, the contract where you're going to go
Yes,
and say, hey, here's a potential something you need to focus on.
exactly.
Right. So when I was younger, I actually was in charge of RevRec for Nortel before they died. Right, they were always in trouble. And before 606, there was various SABs. There was the EITFs, and it's a complex chain of if, then, and else's, and you would have, and some of the chain was contradictory, right? In some cases, it would say, why is somebody buying an application like your iPhone? This was a big one they argued about. Am I buying the iPhone because I like the iPhone as a piece of hardware, or am I buying it for the software, for the OS that exists on it? Went round and round on that. And so when you talk about the risks of that, mostly for public companies, and you start making and recognizing revenue, too soon or too late, right? Those are the things that Watson's really good at, because I had a whole team of people that did nothing, including a PhD who was on my staff, who would write nothing but memos about whether or not we were right to recognize revenue or not for different types of technologies. So that's what it does. It does it really well, and it does it really quick, and it learns, if I apply this rule all the time, then my outcome over here is this or that. And so now you have a pattern, because when you're audited again, you have to be able to explain to your regulator, or why you chose to recognize that revenue in this period, or why you chose to defer it. And it's still 606 didn't solve the problem. It's still very complex.
Want to talk through this?
Oh, sure. So one of the, from the last time I spoke with your organization, I had a lot of questions about buy versus build. And when we talked about buy versus build, it was not necessarily buying new technology, but do I build my own team, or do I do it myself? And what I always describe this as is it depends, right, on where you are. The question becomes, do you want to hire your own individuals and start to build your own organization? Do you farm it out? Is it some sort of a in-between? Do you want to start with cloud applications? I'm a real advocate of cloud applications. I love them because they're a lot less expensive and they're easier to maintain. And these companies, these bigger ones like NetSuite, for example, they spend a lot of money on security, so we don't have to worry about it, right? And then there's of course driving towards intelligent automation, which nobody's going to start with. So that's really when we talk about buy versus build, thinking about where you want to go, what you're doing, and how much money you want to spend between now and the time you become a more formalized organization. If you're already a large organization and you're already up and moving, the question becomes, how do you want to move forward? Do you want to build your own center of excellence? Do you want to leverage a company like Eisner to do it? Do you want to go to some other firm to do it? Those are topics around this buy versus build. So.
Talk through this.
So yeah, one of the things that Greg and I have developed over the years, and just even doing implementation, is a process automation roadmap. I am such an advocate of roadmaps, regardless of how big or small you are. have a plan, right? And what we've done is we've decided, and through trial and error, that discovery is really key. So what we do is we go and we do a discovery process. What are you doing? What's your current state? How's your business environment? What are your problems? What are your challenges, right? What possible solutions exist here? And we also look at, future states, as far as looking to it, what type of blueprints there. In this too, what we're not showing here is the ROI. That's a question that I get a lot, which comes back to that data and that investment, that capital investment, right? What are we going to do? What is your horizon? When do you want to see a return on this? We move from there into a foundational environment. Some organizations go towards a center of excellence, some of the bigger ones, where they'll actually build an in-house team and they'll actually start to grow their bots. It's been very successful. As a matter of fact, I was working with a friend of mine who worked at a company that sells hair products. I didn't realize how big this company was, but they started with a few bots, and it became so successful that they weren't able to handle and absorb all the work internally, and so they actually shut the program down and went back and created a center of excellence. And so if they had sort of put that in their mind up front, they would have been able to address it. What ended up happening is it frustrated the organization, and they had to start things over. But you definitely don't want to make that mistake. And then moving from there out to implementing and building the bots. The reality too is that things change, right? Your applications will change, websites will change, so you have to have the infrastructure to deal with those change events, and then put controls around it. So there's different platforms you may decide you want to do. So you may want a configurable bot, which is like a UI path, or you may want a bot that you're actually going to program out and build, which is going to be more expensive, but maybe ultimately centralized and easier to control. So you don't have a bunch of desktop bots, doing work out in the field. So it's a continuum. You most certainly want to take that automation roadmap. Go ahead, sir.
So you use the word application first, and then the product, but then you use the right words. Your phases are nothing but a configurable platform. As you move in the phases, you're configuring the platform to fit the customer need. Is that my understanding correct?
It depends on what tool you're using. So there are some that actually you can code. I like to use the configurable. It's usually more efficient and it's usually less expensive. But there are times where they'll want a unique coding. They'll want to actually go in there and start to design and build. Maybe it's something very unique to their business, and in that case, they'll want to go ahead and code it up. Just depends.
Yeah, it depends on what platform you're using.
Right, right.
You can use R, Python, and some of this too.
Right, so some applications you may want an API, right? You may want to directly draw in from your automation tool, and others you may want to just use it as a human emulator. So it just depends, and that may take more effort around those data sets that you're going to import. So definitely, this is my favorite. That's me. I'm the butterfly in the center.
You're the one that's different. Yeah, you're
I'm
not
always
a part
different.
of the sea of sameness.
I think the bottom line is that the organizations that are willing to be different, I believe, are the ones that are going to ultimately be the most profitable and will be sustainable. It's the ones that don't want to change, that are just focused on doing the same thing over and over, are, I think, ultimately going to not be as profitable, perhaps not last as long.
And that's what's happening in the ERP space, right? So that's a question we get all the time. Why doesn't the ERP system do this, including SAP and others that are entrenched in process automation? Well, it's because most of the time when an ERP gets implemented, they literally try to configure it the same way it was in the past, not realizing that you can do it a totally different way. And they don't necessarily put that into the requirements. And we're seeing that happening quite a bit. So you'll have an ERP journey, and that could be your CapEx, but we're seeing the digital transformation budget and journey completely different. So we're seeing conversations, we're acting as a team sometimes just to come in and work with the implementers to try to make sure that they're increasing the automation component, maybe within the ERP, maybe outside of the ERP. Because if you try to develop it and configure it in the ERP, it may cost you more, especially if it's one of the larger systems out there, the top tier systems. So it's an analysis.
And ask the roadmap. That's one of the things we like to start. I start with this. What's your plan? How does this fit in with your corporate strategy? Where are you guys going? What do you want to build? Are you going to expand? Are you going to buy a bunch of companies? What's going to happen in your near future and in long-term future? If we don't have that, then you most certainly are probably going to be in a situation where your ERP is not configured or may not even be the right one to grow. Maybe it's an interim and that's okay, and ultimately you're going to have to abandon that and move to another application. But if you know that, it's easier to plan for it.
And this starts at the top as well.
Yeah.
We have to make sure that the leaders of the organization, whether it's 1 or 10 or 100, that they're combating this. So, question?
Yeah, the question. Fascinating presentation, very impressive.
Thank you.
So I have one question. There's a whole bunch of RPA companies right now. Maybe there are hundreds right now already. A lot of copycats. So how do you, when you advise your customer, what do you see? At least what sector industry is more open to using RPA versus what sector is like lagging behind? Because that would be a good information for the entrepreneurs who wants to go and sell their technology to large entities. So could you comment on that?
What industry has been
what industry
has used it the most? Financial services, absolutely. Certainly on the customer interaction side. So you talked about on the investment world, investment advisory world. You're seeing it there. And then you have it on the transaction side and some of the bigger companies within manufacturing and distribution. I wouldn't say, life science is sort of a little bit of a lagger, but they're now gaining a lot of steam. We're seeing it a lot in the M&A space as well, to do due diligence and review a lot of data. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but I know FS has always been the biggest one.
Yeah, I'm looking. I see it more from towers. So the first group that really embraced it across all industries, from when we were working with Redwood, was in accounting and finance, which I was a little surprised to see that, because years ago they were harder. It took longer to adopt HFM and some of the applications. Right, they didn't like the consolidation tool. And they were the first. I'm actually seeing a ton of operational units now, supply chain people that I thought they would be the first, and they were the last, sort of the laggards. I'm really seeing a lot of activity in supply chain, in the supply chain groups, and now also even in some of the HR and in the security roles, right, where you have people onboarded and offboarded applications, and they're looking at using, RPA to help manage it. Even if there's applications out there like SailPoint and stuff that focus on it, we're starting to see it go out. So I see it more in terms of towers.
In the supply chain, the real value out of the digital transformation has been seen by blockchain. That's the one in the digital transformation. It gives you the most bang for the buck is the blockchain in the supply chain. And I think that's adoption has been very, very beneficial.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
I would just add, in the origin of RPA really kind of came out of automated test scripting. It evolved over time. It's expanded. But Blue Prism came out of Barclays, came out of banking, insurance. These organizations have large back office operations. So I've seen, in being in the New York area, an immense push to automate as many of those processes as possible, especially in banking, insurance, investment companies. There's just think in your own industries that you support. All the investment operations that take place, trades processing, validations, compliance activities. So I can definitely speak to, there's quite a push to automate as much of that as possible so that they can manage and with all these regulatory type matters, being able to respond to them faster.
So can you, just following up on Vish's question, what about public sector, cities, states, and federal? Are they kind of lagging behind, or are they adopting it too?
I know NASA actually I know NASA is using RPA for their accounting and finance, and Lockheed Martin also embraced the technology pretty early on. Those two I know firsthand. I don't know of any others. I'd say most government tends to lag behind, just in general, period.
Yes.
Hi. So we run a startup called Juby.ai based out of India. So essentially, So we run a startup called Juby.ai based out of India. We're here because we're trying to set up the business in the US now. So we happen to be the market leaders in creating bots for financial services in India. So just want to add to it, there's tremendous traction on customer-facing assets. So the last quarter alone, we've answered 2 million questions only in personal finance. And the end customer uptake is so high that people are seeing as much as 10x,
Right.
in terms of attributable engagement going up across websites and apps and stuff like that. So
Cool.
I think when 18 months back, when we would kind of walk into to do a sales and we would meet the CMO or the CTO, there would be disbelief, right?
Right.
But that entire phase is so gone and so fast. I mean, I think it's just surreal to kind of be part of this revolution that's
Yeah.
happening. In another 4-5 years, we think, UI the way we know it, which is very, orange banner and my boss likes blue banner. All of this is gonna be gone and everything's gonna be replaced by conversational UI. So
Yeah.
just thought kind of would add
Oh,
to
cool.
it because
Very cool.
we kind of seeing it absolutely up close and personal. So yeah.
That's neat.
great.
Thanks
It's a
for
good
sharing.
story.
Yeah, that's
Thank you.
awesome.
And congratulations. So I know we wanted to stay on time. I think we're at 6:15, but we could take more questions. No?
You did say you
I'm
work
looking
with
at you.
smaller- You did say you work with smaller companies.
We do, yes.
What kind of work you doing for them? This is all big company stuff.
Well, actually, we're mostly in the mid-market space. When we're
I meant smaller. These are
smaller, I mean
startups.
less than 100 people. So this is actually what we manage in terms of a whole group within process risk and technology. So when we're doing managed security services, we're actually working more with companies that are less than 150 employees. When we're talking about startups and we're talking about companies that are smaller, it's the outcome and making a decision and how we're going to impact you could be a number of different things. And usually it's in these two buckets. So we may be helping you with business applications, we may be helping you with analytics, maybe some strategy. You're probably not going to do a whole lot in terms of compliance. It depends on what you're doing, obviously. I mean, if you have, regulatory compliance around GDPR and data protection, especially here in California with CCPA, we're literally trying to build a platform that we could capture all of this for you. So think of the platform as Google Maps, but everything behind it could be all the roads, right? The systems that you have, even the people, and we're going to try to direct you in a certain way. So we're trying to build that, and we're bringing in even applications from other companies that are startups and what they've built. So that's really our vision with all of this. But we work with companies across the board. I would say the average is probably a company that has 50 million in revenue. And all the way up from there.
Try to lead to, do you make connections between smaller companies like
Yeah.
Maybe.I and others with the other clients? You play a role in that.
We do.
As a broker.
Absolutely. We even partner with them.
Mhm.
So we create joint ventures. You mean bring them in with us to service that type of connection or even refer them in? We do that all the time. Yeah.
Or you could provide just a complete solution as an outsourced service.
That's right. Well, outsourcing is a big deal. So, we work with, that's actually who we want to work with the most. The bigger the company gets, like even the Black Lions and the Workivas, as they're public companies now, they're getting big. That's great. But when they get really big, it's hard to maneuver that big ship sometimes. So we tend to work with smaller companies that are actually even at that startup phase. So we can help you grow and even create some joint ventures. So that's a big strategy of ours. And we're interested to talk to all of you if you want to talk about them. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
Wonderful. Well, we really appreciate it. Thank you very much for having us.